Margaret's arthritic fingers gripped the steering wheel as she pulled into the dusty gas station. At 82, she'd driven this route between Phoenix and Tucson countless times, but never this late. The sun hung low, casting long shadows across the cracked asphalt. Her old Honda wheezed to a stop beside Pump 3. The station looked abandoned, except for the flickering neon sign that buzzed like an angry wasp. She needed gas and a bathroom break before the final stretch home. As she stepped out, her sensible shoes crunched on scattered gravel. The desert wind whipped her silver hair around her face. She'd always been small, barely 5 feet tall, but age had made her seem even more fragile. The rumble started as a distant thunder, growing louder. Margaret looked up to see motorcycles approaching, big, chrome-heavy machines that gleamed despite the dust. 7 riders in black leather, their faces hidden behind dark sunglasses and bandanas. They pulled in with deliberate slowness, engines revving unnecessarily loud. The lead rider, a mountain of a man with arms covered in tattoos, killed his engine and swung his leg over the seat. His boots hit the ground with authority. Margaret continued toward the station's convenience store, pretending not to notice their arrival, but she felt their eyes following her every step. The automatic door chimed as she entered, and she heard laughter behind her, low, predatory sounds that made her stomach tighten. She'd lived through enough to recognize trouble when she saw it. These men weren't here for gas. They were here for something else entirely, and she was the only other person around. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as she made her way to the restroom, hoping they'd be gone when she came out. The restroom door clicked shut behind Margaret, and she took a shaky breath. Through the thin walls, she could hear the bikers' voices growing louder, more animated. Their laughter had an edge to it that made her hands tremble as she washed them. When she emerged, they were waiting. The 7 men had positioned themselves strategically around the store. The leader leaned against the counter, blocking her path to the exit. 2 others flanked the door. The rest spread out among the aisles, their presence filling the small space with menace. "Well, well," the leader drawled, his voice gravelly from years of cigarettes and shouting over engines. "Look what we got here, boys. Little old lady, all alone." Margaret kept her expression neutral, though her heart hammered against her ribs. She'd raised 5 children and buried a husband. She'd faced down plenty of bullies in her day, though none quite like these. "Excuse me," she said politely, moving toward the counter. "I just need to pay for my gas." The leader didn't budge. Up close, she could see the patches on his vest. Road Devils MC and Sergeant at Arms. His beard was streaked with grey and a scar ran from his left ear to his jaw. "What's the hurry, Grandma?" He grinned, revealing yellowed teeth. "We're just being friendly. Ain't that right, boys?" The others chuckled and moved closer. Margaret felt the walls closing in. The teenage clerk behind the counter looked terrified, his eyes darting between the bikers and the phone. "Don't even think about it, kid," one of the bikers warned. Margaret realized she was truly on her own. The leader's name tag read Diesel, though Margaret doubted that was his birth name. He circled her slowly, like a predator sizing up prey. The other bikers watched with cruel amusement, some recording with their phones. "You know what I think?" Diesel said, stopping in front of her. "I think you're carrying some serious cash in that little purse. Old ladies always do. Social security check, maybe some savings." Margaret clutched her worn leather handbag closer. It contained $37, her driver's license, and a few family photos. Hardly a fortune, but she wasn't about to tell them that. "I don't want any trouble," she said quietly. "Trouble?" Diesel laughed. "Who said anything about trouble? We're just having a conversation, friendly-like." One of the younger bikers, his arms covered in fresh tattoos, stepped forward. "Come on, Diesel, let's just take what we want and go. This is boring." Diesel's expression hardened. "Did I ask for your opinion, Razor?" The younger man stepped back, chastened. Margaret noted the hierarchy, the way fear flickered in Razor's eyes. These men might terrorize others, but they lived in terror of each other. "Now then," Diesel continued, turning back to Margaret. "Where were we? Oh yes, your purse. Why don't you just hand it over? Save us all some time." Margaret's fingers tightened on the bag's strap. She thought of her late husband Robert and how he'd always told her to stand up to bullies. But Robert had been 6'2" and built like a linebacker. She was an 82-year-old woman facing 7 dangerous men. Still, something inside her refused to bend. "No," she said simply. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Diesel's eyebrows shot up, and the other bikers exchanged glances. Clearly they weren't used to resistance, especially from someone like Margaret. "No?" Diesel repeated, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Did you just tell me no?" Margaret's mouth went dry, but she held her ground. "I said no. I'm not giving you my purse." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Razor cracked his knuckles, and another biker, this one with Viper stitched on his vest, moved to block the back exit. "Lady, you got some serious balls," Diesel said, though his tone suggested this wasn't a compliment. "But balls ain't gonna help you here. You're outnumbered 7-1, and we ain't exactly choir boys." Margaret could smell their leather, their sweat, the motor oil embedded in their clothes. The fluorescent light flickered overhead, casting strange shadows on their faces. The teenage clerk had gone pale as paper. "Last chance, Grandma," Diesel continued. "Hand over the purse, and maybe we let you drive away with all your teeth." Margaret's mind raced. She thought of her children, her grandchildren, all the people counting on her to make it home safely. But she also thought of every victim who'd ever given in to bullies like these. Every person who'd been made to feel small and powerless. "I told you no," she repeated, her voice steadier than she felt. Diesel's face darkened. He took a step closer, close enough that she could smell the whiskey on his breath. "Wrong answer." He reached for her purse, his massive hand closing around the strap. Margaret held on, though she knew it was futile. That's when she remembered her phone. Margaret's free hand slipped into her jacket pocket, fingers closing around her old flip phone. It was a relic by modern standards, but it worked, and right now, that's all that mattered. "Help!" the clerk suddenly shouted. "Somebody help us!" Viper was on him in seconds, grabbing the boy by his shirt and slamming him against the wall. "Shut up, kid, or you'll be eating through a straw for a month." The distraction was all Margaret needed. Her thumb found the speed dial button, number 3. She'd programmed it years ago and never thought she'd actually use it. The phone rang once, twice. Diesel was still tugging at her purse, growing more frustrated by the second. The other bikers were laughing, making crude jokes about teaching old ladies respect. "Yeah," the voice on the other end was gruff, tired. "Tommy?" Margaret said quietly, hoping the bikers wouldn't notice the phone pressed to her ear. "Grandma Maggie? That you?" "I need help, sweetheart. I'm at a gas station on Route 10, about 30 miles east of Phoenix. There are some men here and they—" Diesel finally noticed the phone. His eyes went wide with rage. "What the hell?" He lunged for the device, but Margaret was quicker than she looked. She ducked under his reach, the phone still pressed to her ear. "Road devils," she said quickly into the phone, reading from Diesel's vest. "7 of them. They're trying to rob me." "Road devils." The voice on the other end changed, became sharp, alert. "Grandma, you stay on the line. Don't hang up. I'm coming." Diesel managed to grab the phone, but it was too late. The call had connected, the message delivered. He stared at the device in his hand, then at Margaret. "Who did you call, old woman?" Margaret straightened her shoulders, meeting Diesel's glare with quiet dignity. "My grandson." The bikers erupted in laughter. Razor slapped his knee, nearly doubling over. "Her grandson? What's he gonna do? Ride to the rescue on his bicycle?" But Diesel wasn't laughing. Something in Margaret's tone, in the way she'd said it, made him pause. He looked down at the phone in his hand, then back at her face. "What's your grandson's name?" he asked slowly. "Tommy," Margaret replied. "Tommy Morrison." The laughter died instantly. The name hung in the air like a death sentence. Viper's grip on the clerk loosened. Razor's grin faded. Even the youngest bikers, the ones who'd been filming everything, lowered their phones. "Tommy Morrison," Diesel repeated, his voice barely a whisper. "Thunder Tommy Morrison," Margaret nodded. "That's what they call him, yes." The change in the room was immediate and dramatic. The predators had become prey in the space of a heartbeat. Diesel's face had gone ashen beneath his tan. His hands actually shook as he stared at the phone. "Jesus Christ," Viper breathed. "We just tried to rob Thunder Tommy's grandmother." Margaret watched their transformation with grim satisfaction. She'd never liked Tommy's lifestyle, had spent years trying to talk him out of it. But she understood now why Robert had always said family was everything. Sometimes the black sheep of the family was exactly who you needed. "He's on his way," she said calmly. "I'd suggest you boys think very carefully about what you want to do next." Diesel's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. Everyone in the outlaw motorcycle world knew Tommy Morrison's reputation. Thunder. Tommy Morrison wasn't just any biker. He was the president of the Desert Serpents, the most powerful motorcycle club in the Southwest. His territory stretched from Las Vegas to El Paso, and his word was law on every mile of highway in between. Margaret had watched him grow from a sweet little boy who loved bedtime stories into a man whose very name could silence a room full of hardened criminals. She'd never approved of his choices, but she'd never stopped loving him either. The road devils knew the stories. Everyone did. Tommy had earned his reputation the hard way, through violence and cunning that had left a trail of broken clubs and buried enemies across 3 states. He was 45 now, old enough to be strategic, young enough to be dangerous. "How long?" Diesel asked, his voice cracking slightly. Margaret glanced at the clock on the wall. "He was in Tucson when I called. Probably 20 minutes, maybe less if he's riding hard." 20 minutes. In 20 minutes, the most feared man in the Southwest would arrive to find his grandmother being terrorized by a second-rate club from Phoenix. The road devils might be tough enough to intimidate gas station clerks and old ladies, but they were minnows compared to Thunder Tommy. Razor was already backing toward the door. "Diesel man, we gotta go right now." But Diesel seemed frozen, still staring at Margaret as if she were a ghost. "You're really his grandmother?" "His father's mother," Margaret confirmed. "Tommy's been taking care of me since his dad passed 5 years ago. He's very protective." The understatement of the century. Tommy Morrison's protection was legendary, and his vengeance was biblical. The last club that had crossed his family had simply disappeared one night. Their clubhouse burned to the ground. "We didn't know," Diesel said weakly. Margaret's expression didn't soften. "That's not really an excuse, is it?" The road devils were falling apart before Margaret's eyes. Viper had released the clerk entirely and was pacing like a caged animal. Razor was openly hyperventilating. 2 of the younger bikers had already slipped out the back door. "We could run," one of them suggested. "Get back on the highway, put some distance between us and—" "Run where?" Diesel snapped. "You think Thunder Tommy doesn't have people everywhere? You think we can just disappear?" Margaret almost felt sorry for them. Almost. But then she remembered the fear in the young clerk's eyes, the way they'd surrounded her like a pack of wolves. Whatever happened next, they'd brought on themselves. "Maybe we could explain," Viper said desperately. "Tell him it was a misunderstanding, that we didn't mean any harm." Diesel laughed bitterly. "You want to explain to Thunder Tommy Morrison why we were threatening his grandmother? Be my guest. I'll send flowers to your funeral." The remaining bikers were looking at each other with growing panic. These were men who'd spent their lives intimidating others, but now they were the ones afraid. The irony wasn't lost on Margaret. "There's got to be something we can do," Razor pleaded. "Some way to make this right." Margaret spoke up quietly. "You could start by apologizing." They turned to her as if she'd spoken in a foreign language. Apologize. The concept seemed alien to them. "To me," she continued, "and to that young man behind the counter. You could try acting like human beings instead of animals." Diesel's jaw worked silently. Pride warred with terror on his face. These men had probably never apologized for anything in their lives. But Thunder Tommy Morrison was coming, and apologies might be the only thing standing between them, and a very painful death. The sound of approaching motorcycles cut through the desert air like thunder. Not the rumble of 7 bikes, but something deeper, more ominous. The sound of many engines riding in formation. Through the gas station windows, Margaret could see headlights approaching in the distance. A lot of headlights. Tommy never traveled alone, and he'd clearly called in reinforcements. "Oh, God," Razor whispered. "How many of them are there?" Diesel was counting the lights, his face growing paler by the second. 20, maybe 25. The desert serpents were coming in force. This wasn't just a rescue. It was a show of power. Tommy was making a statement that would echo through the outlaw world for years to come. "I'm sorry," Diesel said suddenly, the words tumbling out in a rush. "Ma'am, I'm sorry. We didn't know who you were, and that's no excuse. But we're sorry." The other bikers quickly followed suit, their apologies overlapping in their haste to get the words out. Even Viper, who'd manhandled the clerk, was mumbling something that might have been remorse. Margaret listened to their pleas with the same calm dignity she'd shown throughout the ordeal. These men had revealed their true nature when they thought they held all the power. Now they were showing their true character when they had none. "Apologies are a start," she said finally. "But words are cheap. What matters is what you do next." The rumble was getting closer. Through the windows, they could see the formation taking shape. 2 columns of motorcycles, riding with military precision. At their head was a massive bike with flame decals, and riding it was a figure that made even hardened criminals step back in fear. Thunder Tommy Morrison had arrived. The desert serpents roared into the gas station like an army. 23 motorcycles arranged themselves in a perfect semicircle around the building, their riders dismounting with practiced efficiency. Each man was armed, each movement calculated. At the center of it all was Tommy Morrison himself. Margaret's grandson had inherited his father's height and his mother's dark eyes, but everything else about him was pure intimidation. Leather vest over a black t-shirt, arms covered in tattoos that told the story of his rise through the outlaw world. His beard was streaked with premature gray, and his eyes held the kind of coldness that came from making life and death decisions on a daily basis. He strode through the gas station door like he owned the place, his men flanking him. The road devils pressed themselves against the walls, trying to become invisible. "Grandma Maggie," Tommy said, his voice gentle in a way that seemed impossible coming from such a dangerous man. "You okay?" Margaret smiled, the first genuine smile she'd managed since this ordeal began. "I'm fine, sweetheart, just a little misunderstanding." Tommy's eyes swept the room, taking in the terrified road devils, the shaken clerk, the obvious signs of what had transpired. His expression never changed, but the temperature seemed to drop another 10 degrees. "Misunderstanding," he repeated slowly. "That what we're calling it?" Diesel tried to speak, but only a croak came out. He cleared his throat and tried again. "Mr. Morrison, sir, we didn't know..." "Didn't know what?" Tommy's voice was quiet, conversational. Somehow that made it more terrifying than if he'd been shouting. Didn't know that threatening old ladies was wrong, didn't know that this was my territory, or didn't know that this particular old lady was family. Margaret watched her grandson work. This was why he'd survived in a world where most men died young or went to prison. He didn't need to raise his voice or make threats. His reputation did all the talking. Tommy walked slowly around the gas station, his boots echoing on the linoleum floor. His men remained perfectly still, hands resting casually near weapons. The road devils looked like they were about to faint. "You know what I find interesting?" Tommy said, stopping in front of Diesel. 7 grown men, all armed, all dangerous, decided to terrorize one 82-year-old woman. "That tell you anything about their character?" Margaret had seen Tommy angry before, as a child throwing tantrums, as a teenager rebelling against authority. But this was different. This was the cold, calculating fury of a man who'd built an empire on respect and fear. "We made a mistake," Diesel managed to say. "A big mistake. We're willing to make it right." "Make it right?" Tommy's eyebrows rose. "How exactly do you propose to do that? You gonna unscare my grandmother? You gonna give her back the peace of mind you stole when you surrounded her like a pack of wolves?" Viper stepped forward, his voice shaking. "We'll pay, whatever you want. Money, territory, anything." Tommy laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You think this is about money? You think you can buy your way out of threatening my family?" Margaret could see where this was heading. Tommy's men were getting restless, hands moving closer to weapons. The road devils were outnumbered and outgunned, trapped in a situation that could only end one way, unless she intervened. "Tommy," she said quietly. Her grandson's head turned toward her, and for a moment, the dangerous club president disappeared. He was just her grandson again, the little boy who'd cried when she read him sad stories. "Yes, Grandma." "They apologized," she said. "And they're scared enough that they'll never do anything like this again. Sometimes that's enough." Tommy's jaw tightened. "They threatened you." "Yes, they did, and now they know better." The gas station fell silent, except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant rumble of idling motorcycles outside. Tommy stared at his grandmother, conflict playing across his features. Margaret had raised him after his parents died in a car crash when he was 12. She tried to steer him away from the outlaw life, but when he chose it anyway, she'd never stopped loving him. Now she was asking him to show mercy to men who terrorized her. "You sure about this, Grandma?" Tommy asked. Margaret looked at the road devils, cowering against the walls. They were bullies and cowards, but they were also somebody's sons, maybe somebody's fathers. Killing them wouldn't undo what they'd done, and it wouldn't make her feel any safer. "I'm sure," she said. Tommy nodded slowly, then turned back to Diesel. "You're getting a gift you don't deserve. My grandmother has a bigger heart than you'll ever understand, but don't mistake mercy for weakness." He stepped closer to Diesel, close enough that the bigger man had to look up to meet his eyes. "You and your club are done in Arizona. Pack up, move out, and don't ever come back. If I see any of you in my territory again, if I even hear your names mentioned, I'll finish what you started here tonight." Diesel nodded frantically. "Yes, sir, understood. We'll be gone by morning." "You'll be gone in an hour," Tommy corrected. "And spread the word. Margaret Morrison is under my protection. Anyone who even looks at her wrong will answer to me personally." The road devils were already moving toward the door, desperate to escape before Tommy changed his mind. But Tommy wasn't done. "One more thing," he called out. "You owe this young man an apology too." He gestured toward the clerk, who was still pressed against the wall behind the counter. The road devils turned back, shame and relief warring on their faces. One by one they approached the teenage clerk, mumbling apologies for scaring him. The boy accepted them with wide eyes, probably still unable to believe what he was witnessing. Diesel was the last to apologize, his voice barely audible. "Sorry, kid. We were out of line. Tommy watched it all with cold satisfaction. Now get out of my sight. The road devils fled like their lives depended on it, which they probably did. Their motorcycles roared to life in the parking lot, and within minutes they were gone, disappearing into the desert night like a bad dream. Tommy's men began filing out as well, their job done. Soon it was just Tommy, Margaret, and the shaken clerk in the fluorescent-lit store. "You okay, son?" Tommy asked the clerk, his voice gentle again. The boy nodded, though his hands were still shaking. "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." Tommy pulled out his wallet and placed several $100 bills on the counter. "For your trouble, and for keeping quiet about what happened here tonight." The clerk's eyes widened at the money, but he nodded understanding. In the outlaw world, discretion was more valuable than gold. Tommy turned to his grandmother, and Margaret saw the little boy again in his eyes. "Come on, Grandma. Let me follow you home." Margaret smiled and patted his cheek. "That would be nice, sweetheart." As they walked toward the door, Margaret reflected on the evening's events. She'd been terrified, yes, but she'd also seen something remarkable. 7 dangerous men had been transformed by fear into something almost human. They'd learned what it meant to be powerless, to be afraid. Maybe, just maybe, they'd remember that feeling the next time they encountered someone weaker than themselves. Outside, Tommy helped her into her Honda, then climbed onto his massive motorcycle. As they pulled out onto the highway, Margaret looked in her rearview mirror at the gas station growing smaller behind them. It had been an ordinary stop that became extraordinary, a moment when family bonds proved stronger than fear and mercy proved more powerful than vengeance. Sometimes the most important lessons came from the most unexpected places. The desert stretched out before them, and Margaret Morrison drove home under the protection of the most dangerous man in the Southwest, who also happened to be the sweetest grandson a woman could ask for.